one thing at Pavilion, and granted, people are going to tell me this isn't scalable, but it was a process and it was repeatable, which is every NPS score we got, we responded to personally. It wasn't a workflow. It was, hey, I saw you gave a 7. What can we do to get a 10? Or like, you gave a 10 and you said why. I'm like, awesome. That's great. I love your feedback. Could we jump on a call so I can hear more about it? Now, guess what? Now, how have I made you feel by making that response? Your opinion is important. I value it. And I've just created a relationship with you. And now I've just created an evangelist that I can, identify and work to engage and empower and amplify.
Hey everyone, I'm Joel Premack, host of the Community-Led Growth Show. Today I'm joined by Leslie Greenwood, founder and CEO at Chief Evangelist Consulting. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joel. I appreciate it.
Of course. Let's start off with a quick question. Before we get into the meat of today's conversation, would you please give all of our listeners a brief 30-second intro about yourself?
Awesome. I'm glad that wasn't going to be tell us some crazy story about you that I've had to make up on the top of my
No. I'm not crazy and wild over here.
Okay, awesome. Well, obviously I'm Leslie Greenwood. I live in Dallas, Texas. I have 3 children. I have just launched Chief Evangelist Consulting as of November. I decided through my last role at Pavilion, where I was Vice President of Member Success, which, I thought was a customer success role, was actually a community role, that, when I looked at what I wanted to do next with my life, that I love community and I didn't love customer success as much. And so that led me to Chief Evangelist Consulting, where I am helping companies, a lot of startups and founders, build communities, but through a lens of evangelist-led growth, which is what we're going to talk about today. And other than that, I have 2 dogs, and they're both very bad, and I have one locked in a bedroom. So hopefully you'll never hear him today, but we'll see.
Well, it's all good. If we hear dog joins you, it's cool. We've had dogs before on the show. We've had dogs, we've had spouses, we've had kids. Hey, so
Kids come.
It's all good. Well, for today's conversation, I want to start off by grounding it really with how you define evangelism. And then as a follow-up to that, how do you differentiate between evangelist programs and ambassador programs?
Mm-hmm. So evangelism for me, and I know there's really 2 ways to look at evangelism. So you have your top-down evangelists. So those are the people that I think about, like Ethan Butte, Jen Allen, Nick Bennett, people like that have probably risen their way up through the ranks, and they're out talking about the company, and that's part of their role. I'm really looking at building a bottoms up kind of evangelism. So what that means, an evangelist to me is someone who you've provided, your service, your product, your community has provided, value probably many times over. You have made a connection with that person so that they feel so kind of like tied and invested in your brand that they'll go out and talk about you. Even if there's no referral program, there's no nothing. It is just because they love your brand. And so that's really where my focus is, on this bottoms up. When I think about ambassadors, maybe some people, some of them I've heard called advocates. Some of them are actually called advisors, but they're really not a startup advisor. Those are people that I'm thinking of more as, and this is not every company, they're paid in some respect, whether it's stock or cash, but someone's more directing what they're doing. And so that's really my difference. Whereas for me, evangelists do it on their own volition. Now, granted, through what I'm kind of talking about and teaching, we're going to nurture them, identify, engage, empower, and amplify them. So we're going to put a process to it, but it's not a paid. It's something we've earned. The companies earn the right to ask, or earn the right that the person just wants to do it on their own. So I guess that's my differentiator.
Cool. It's really interesting. I know ambassador programs that I guess would fall almost into the basket of evangelist programs the way you described them. So it's very interesting to hear how you define the two, and really that pay differentiator is key. That's
I think you
very
can tell,
interesting.
honestly. I think you can tell.
I would agree. That's also something I think more in general when we see like B2B influencers, that's really where I start to see it too. It's just like, has this person used the product and generally speaking passionately, or is it something that they were like clearly provided with and it just falls just as flat as a generic ad?
Hmm. Yeah.
Only time will tell how that evolves.
Yep.
Will be a fun little thing for the future. Well, we're now going to go further into this. Now that we have set the stage by defining evangelism programs, what do you see as kind of the connection between an evangelist program or strategy and a community strategy at organizations that you're working with or have previously worked at?
Hmm. Yeah, I think you think about like community-led growth or product-led growth or customer-led growth. Those all start with one thing before you can even get there, and that's the evangelist. That's that person that loves the product enough to, join the community, to recommend the product to others so they can come to your website and get the free trial. So like for me, evangelists are the building blocks of these other strategies. So I think it's really just a focus. I mean, some people they're doing it and they just don't know it. I think what this is like codifying it, saying this is a strategy, and then putting in place, what are the processes, how are we going to identify these evangelists? Maybe they're not the ones that are, they're not your community member always. That's the one raising their hand and answering every question and welcoming every new member. Of course, we love those. I mean, if you just come deliver yourself to me on a plate, that's great. But Joel, like you're in plenty of communities and this is what you do. It's like there is so much value in your lurkers, the people that you may never hear from, but they log in twice a week. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to log into random communities more than once if I'm not finding value. And so it's like, where do we find all these people? And then how do we engage them? Where's the, what's the process? What's their persona? I mean, I'm going to go engage you or, the people that I used to engage in Pavilion. I know it motivates them. I know I give them a little bit of platform. I set them up as a leadership in the community and I treat them a certain way. But now, do I think that's going to work with a community of engineers? Yeah, absolutely not. Inviting them on a podcast is not a winning strategy for that one, most likely. So that's really the way, that I think that community evangelism can run into community strategy. And I think it should be a part of every community strategy, even if you don't call it that.
Awesome. I would 100% agree that there has to be that like feeling behind it. It can't be something that feels very transactional because to me that is just like any other business relationship. You kind of want to break through and make it personal.
Mhm.
To me, and that's like how I view it and I feel about it. I also am same as you. I don't join communities that I'm a part of regularly unless I see immense value. I've actually gone through a little bit of a cleaning up process in my life and phase of actually leaving some. So
Mhm.
it is what it is, but we all have so much time and spend it where it's worth it.
Mhm.
That's just my
Yep.
take on it.
Agreed.
So awesome. Now I'm curious. You just kind of mentioned that whether it's lurkers or people who are really active in your community or just fans of your brand potentially too, and you may see them on social, things of that nature regularly. What are some like of those common characteristics that you would almost say like, hey, this person has the potential to be an evangelist for our community, company, whatever, should they kind of like continue to be active in doing this on their own? What are some of those activities or traits, really, I guess is what I would call them, that you would say like stand out and rise above the rest to say this person could be great?
Mhm. I think that I don't know if it's because I think the personas of your personality, the personas of your community are going to like define those traits. So I don't know that the traits would be something that would be through from community to community. I think, like you said, lurkers, you're loud people. I think you can find them if your community is supporting, a platform, you can find them through your Pendo data or your usage data. Like Joel logs into XYZ 17 times a day. Joel has 10 other seats in his, that are open or that, he has coworkers assigned to. They're not logging in as much. So how do we engage Joel to get more people to use the product? So you're going to look at it through product data. Most companies have an NPS program, but I bet most companies don't actually do anything with the NPS. I don't necessarily care about the score. Sorry, was that controversial? I honestly, I don't
Hey,
think.
I'm here for the hot takes. I'm here for all of the hot takes, questionable or not questionable. I just thought that that was really interesting, but
I don't
stood
think.
out to
I
me
don't
at
think they.
least.
I don't think they do much with it. I would guess that most people don't read them, and I don't really care much about the score. Of course, the score is important. What I care about is what they wrote. If they wrote something and they specifically said something, then you are a prime candidate for me to be an evangelist, for me to talk to you about being an evangelist in some way. And one thing at Pavilion, and granted, people are going to tell me this isn't scalable, but it was a process and it was repeatable, which is every NPS score we got, we responded to personally. It wasn't a workflow. It was, hey, I saw you gave a 7. What can we do to get a 10? Or like you gave a 10 and you said why. I'm like, awesome. That's great. I love your feedback. Could we jump on a call so I can hear more about it? Now, guess what? Now, how have I made you feel by making that response? Your opinion is important. I value it. And I've just created a relationship with you. And now I've just created an evangelist that I can, identify and work to engage and empower and amplify.
I love that. And I think that that's so unique that it's a process that's just not scalable, but you all did it anyway because it provided so much value.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
love that.
I'm reframing
So,
scalable though, by the way. Scalable just means that there's a written process that can be repeated.
hey, that alone counts for a lot. That alone, trust me, counts for a lot, especially if it's just written down. So, you understand what I'm hinting at with that. Sometimes guessing just isn't okay in life.
True that.
Hmm. So, now that we've talked about how evangelist programs and community can intersect, I'd be really curious to how, when you're working with founders or people in community roles now, how you see the like relationship and therefore the ROI of these types of programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that also depends on the type of community that you're building. I mean, I'm sure every person on your community podcast so far has talked about spaces, the different types of communities that you can build. I think aligning your community to your business outcomes to begin with is important. And so, for instance, for evangelists, let's say you either do or do not have a referral program yet. That's the first thing I'm going to ask any community that I'm talking to that is looking to grow. Do they have it? Have they looked at the data? That's another place you can find your evangelists. I may not have referred you 10 people, but if I've referred you 2 that have closed, you better be talking to me. So, I'm going to probably talk about referral information first. I mean, as an example, in at Pavilion, we went from 2,000 to 10,000 members in 2 years, which was crazy but fun. And I learned so much. Very little ad spend at all. It was, we decided that there was a way we were going to treat our members, which, the ACV of a Pavilion member is not actually someone I'd probably want to tech touch, even in most most B2B SaaS companies, but we treated them like enterprise customers. We called every single member within 4 business hours of joining. We personal phone calls at any time. The way we responded, how we responded, the time in which we responded, like it was the experience that we chose to give them is what drove, besides the value, obviously value first, but there's still that experience that you have to have that will supersede value at some point. And growing that fast without much ad spend, I think is a testament to how we viewed evangelists and how they helped grow the company.
Amazing. I guess with that, it's really interesting because the outsider looking in, before I joined Pavilion, I thought it was really interesting just how people always talked about it just so naturally on LinkedIn, especially. It's very common for me to just go through LinkedIn and just scroll through and be like, there's one, there's two, there's a third, and it's all different personas. Typically, though, I will say within the go-to-market space, but I would imagine that given that it came out of that space, that still remained probably your mostly bread and butter.
Yep, 100% true. And that's during my time there, we did not have ambassadors. We might have chapter heads. So I was a chapter head. And of course, it helped me to I wanted to highlight my members and things like that. But there were no ambassadors. That was just members.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. What would you say is an example of an evangelist program that you believe rises above the rest? And follow-up question to that is, why do you believe it does?
I don't know yet. I mean, Pavilion, but this is, as far as I know and what I've been told, focusing on these evangelists as an actual growth strategy is the first many people have heard of it. So honestly, I'm just getting started. I want to create a movement and have me back next year, Joel, and then let me tell you more about it.
Fair enough. Okay. Taking that in a different direction then. I know you just spent a lot of time periodically throughout our conversation so far talking about referral programs. When you're thinking of the V1 or MVP of setting up a referral program, how do you recommend organizations or communities to do that?
Mm-hmm. If you're bootstrapped and you're really just trying to do it, I'd put make an Excel sheet, and people would send us referrals all the time. You might have DM'd me and said, hey, I have a friend, they'd be great. I'm like, okay, great. Send me their email. I'll reach out, easy peasy. If you're super startup, put it on an Excel sheet. Many referral programs aren't super expensive. Generate a link, share it with your people. The returns are obviously very great if you have done the work. The thing is, before that, you had to have done the work to earn the referral. So yeah, you can do anything from super bootleg to getting a platform, but even those you'll recoup your money so fast.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Last but not least, as we wrap up today's conversation, what are 3 community trends you're most excited for in B2B SaaS that you're going to be looking out for in 2023 and beyond?
I think the first thing, I don't know if I think it'll be a trend because I've heard people talking about it, but it's something I particularly want is I would love a more standard definition of community. So right now, community kind of falls for me like customer success. We call it community, we call it customer success. It's like calling it a Kleenex, but really it's a tissue. And there are 75 different types of tissues, all of varying quality, that we're still all calling Kleenex. I don't know if everybody will get that reference, maybe not overseas, but that's my reference. So I would love to see, because I've talked to people. They're like, I have a community, or I want to build a community. And I look like, that's not a community. You have a place where people might come, maybe. and say a sentence. That's not a community. So I would love to see a better definition. I hope that we're moving in that direction to see, an actual true definition of community that includes some of these things that we've talked about, like the connection, members helping members, things like that. The second thing is obviously a more multimedia approach. You hear a lot in SaaS right now that every SaaS company should be a media company. So communities that just have one place where it's whether it's a platform, it's Slack, if you're not having virtual events, in-person events, newsletters, surveys, like all of these, catering to all these different ways that you're pushing your information out, I think you're probably going to be behind. And the last thing is that, I don't know, this is just also my hope is just, I want to see a lot more personal approach to community. I really want us to focus on look and feel and just stop using the word community as a place I go to get support answers. So I don't know. I hope so.
I like them. I also would hope for when there's a standard definition of community, I hope that then that helps standardize then like pay bands and comp and total rewards packages, because this is such almost a mythical role to so many organizations right now. So that's what I hope, because then that also helps pay equity, which I believe 100%. Is very important.
100%. I was actually talking to someone right before this, and he said, that one thing like now in tech and B2B that's not, many things aren't taught in college, but like there's no community courses in college. You can't get you can get kind of certified in it, but not really. And so, yeah, you're right. That probably does lead to, and I think that probably pay is lower in community, the area of community, than it probably should be.
We will only find out with time. Leslie, thank you again for being on the Community Growth Show today. If people want to follow or connect with you afterwards, what are the best channels and or handles for them to use?
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I probably spend a little bit too much time there every day. So it's just Leslie-Greenwood. You can visit my website at thechiefelvangelist.com, or you can email me at Leslie@thechiefelvangelist. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Have a good one.
Great. Thanks. You too.